Her twin daughters need heart surgery, but the only surgeon available is the billionaire CEO who abandoned them. Hi, my beautiful family. Before we begin today's story, let's pause and thank God for the blessings in our lives. Dear God, thank you for this beautiful family. Bless everyone watching with peace, healing, and joy. Let this story touch the hearts that need it most, and may love guide every moment. Amen. Today I bring you a joyful announcement from my heart. I've become a grandfather. My elder son, Will Peter, has been blessed with a beautiful baby boy, and our beloved Binta is overjoyed. We're celebrating us, and since you are part of this family, I want to share this moment with you. Now, my beautiful family, I need your help. We're looking for the perfect name for this little angel, and I want that name to come from you. Drop your most beautiful name ideas in the comments, the one that touches our hearts the most. Will receive a special gift from me, Mr. Peter. Let's name this blessing together as one loving family. Now, let's begin the story. The world stopped the moment Dr. Rafferty Montgomery's gentle voice spoke the words that would shatter everything Janiah Williams thought she knew about tomorrow. I'm afraid both girls have the same condition, Mrs. Williams. His weathered hands folded carefully over the manila folders that held her daughter's futures, or the absence of them. It's called hypoplastic left heart syndrome with mitral atresia. Extremely rare to see it present in twins, and even rarer to see it progress this rapidly. Janiah's fingers tightened around the arms of the leather chair, her knuckles whitening as she fought to breathe. Across the mahogany desk, family photos smiled back at her. Dr. Montgomery's grandchildren, rosy-cheeked and healthy, their hearts beating strong and sure in their chests. She wanted to sweep them all to the floor. What does that mean? The words came out as a whisper, though she'd meant to sound strong. She was always strong. Had to be. 7 years of single motherhood had taught her that much. Their hearts are essentially failing, Mrs. Williams. The left side, the part that pumps blood to the body, it's severely underdeveloped. Without surgical intervention, both Serafina and Evangeline have perhaps 6 months. 6 months. The number hung in the sterile air like a death sentence. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the pediatric cardiology office, Janiah could see the playground where her daughters had been laughing just an hour ago. Serafina pushing Evangeline on the swing, both of them breathless and pink-cheeked, arguing over who could fly higher. Now she understood why they'd been getting tired so easily, why Evangeline had been falling asleep during her favorite movies, why Serafina's lips sometimes turned that frightening shade of blue. There has to be something you can do. Janiah's voice grew stronger, that familiar fight rising in her chest. She'd clawed her way through nursing school while pregnant with twins, worked double shifts to keep them fed and clothed, faced down every obstacle life had thrown at them. She would not, could not, lose them now. Dr. Montgomery leaned forward, his kind eyes full of the compassion that made him beloved by families facing the unthinkable. There is a surgery. It's called the Norwood procedure, followed by staged reconstructions. But it's incredibly complex, especially in cases this advanced. The success rate is... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Limited. How limited? For cases like theirs, performed by most surgeons, perhaps 30%. 30%. Janiah closed her eyes, trying to imagine a world where she lost one daughter, or both. The thought made her physically ill. However, Dr. Montgomery continued, his tone shifting slightly, there is one surgeon who has had remarkable success with this particular variant of the condition, Dr. Adam Voges at Mercy General. His success rate with these cases is closer to 90%. The name hit her like a physical blow. Adam. After 7 years of carefully rebuilt walls, 7 years of convincing herself she was better without him, 7 years of telling the twins their father was simply gone, and now he was the only person who could save them. Are you certain there's no one else? The question sounded pathetic, even to her own ears. Mrs. Williams, I wouldn't recommend anyone else for my own grandchildren. Dr. Voges is... gifted isn't a strong enough word. He sees hearts differently than the rest of us. I've watched him perform miracles. Dr. Montgomery's eyes studied her face carefully. You know him? It wasn't a question. Janiyah nodded slowly, her throat tight. He's their father. Understanding dawned in the older man's eyes, followed immediately by professional discretion. He'd been practicing long enough to know that medicine often forced people to face their most complicated relationships under the worst possible circumstances. I see. That does complicate things. He reached for his phone. Would you like me to call ahead? Explain the situation. No. Janiyah stood abruptly, her purse clutched against her chest like armor. I'll handle it. Dr. Montgomery rose as well, extending a business card. His direct line is on the back. Mrs. Williams, Janiyah, these are beautiful, bright little girls. Don't let pride get in the way of giving them their best chance. The words followed her out of the office, down the sterile hallways that smelled of disinfectant and dashed hopes. Through the elevator doors and across the parking lot where her 15-year-old Honda waited, patient and reliable like everything else in the small, careful life she'd built. Serafina and Evangeline were waiting in the back seat, looking impossibly young in their matching sundresses. Yellow for Serafina, lavender for Evangeline. At 8 years old, they were still identical enough that strangers couldn't tell them apart. But Janiyah knew every difference. Serafina's left eyebrow had a tiny scar from when she'd tried to climb the bookshelf at age 3. Evangeline's voice was slightly softer, more musical. Serafina was the protector, Evangeline the dreamer. Mama, can we get ice cream now? Serafina's voice held that note of impatience that meant she'd been waiting as long as her young attention span could manage. The doctor was really nice, Evangeline added softly, always the peacemaker. He had pictures of puppies on his ceiling. Janiyah turned to face them, memorizing their faces, as if seeing them for the first time. Serafina's dark curls escaped from her ponytail in wild spirals that defied every hair product known to mankind. Evangeline's were tamer, flowing in gentle waves past her shoulders. Both had inherited Adam's striking green eyes, set in faces that were purely Janiyah's, high cheekbones, full lips, skin the color of warm honey. We'll get ice cream tomorrow, baby, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Right now, Mama needs to make some phone calls. Important calls? Serafina asked, suddenly alert. She had an uncanny ability to sense when something was wrong, a trait that had served her well as the self-appointed guardian of her more sensitive sister. Very important, Janiyah confirmed, starting the engine. The radio came to life, playing some cheerful pop song that felt obscene in the face of what she'd just learned. She switched it off quickly. Are we in trouble? Evangeline's voice was barely audible. No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. We just need to see another doctor, a special one. The drive home passed in a blur of familiar streets and ordinary life continuing around them. Parents pushing strollers, teenagers walking dogs, an old man watering his garden, all of them blissfully unaware that her world had just collapsed. At every red light, Janiyah glanced in the rearview mirror, watching her daughters play some elaborate hand game they'd invented, their laughter a sound she suddenly feared she might lose forever. Their small duplex sat at the end of a quiet street lined with mature oak trees. Janiyah had chosen it specifically for the large backyard where the girls could play safely, and for the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched them when Janiyah worked late shifts at the community hospital. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that barely fit a table for 3, but it was theirs. Go wash your hands, she told the girls as they tumbled through the front door, and then quiet time for an hour. But Mama, Serafina began. "No arguments today, baby. Please." Something in her tone must have warned them because both girls obeyed without their usual negotiation attempts. Janaya waited until she heard the bathroom door close before sinking onto the worn couch and pulling out Dr. Montgomery's card. Adam's direct line stared back at her, 10 digits that separated her from the man who had once been her everything. She'd memorized his old number, could still dial it in her sleep, but this was different, professional, distant. The number of Dr. Adam Voges, renowned surgeon, not the Adam who used to trace her spine with his fingertips while she fell asleep. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone. She'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times over the years, usually late at night when missing him felt like drowning, but she'd never imagined it would be about saving their children's lives. The phone rang once, twice. Dr. Voges. His voice was exactly the same, deep, warm, with that slight rasp that had always made her stomach flutter. 7 years collapsed into nothing, and suddenly she was 25 again, head over heels in love with a brilliant surgeon who made her believe in fairy tales. Adam. His name came out as barely a breath. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they'd never said and everything they'd lost. Janaya. The surprise in his voice was followed immediately by something else, longing, perhaps, or regret. "How did you... What's wrong?" He still knew her well enough to recognize that she wouldn't call unless something was terribly wrong. The thought was both comforting and devastating. "It's the girls," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "It's Serafina and Evangeline. They're sick, Adam. They need you." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was purely professional, though she could hear the emotion underneath. "What's the diagnosis?" "Hypoplastic left heart syndrome with mitral atresia. Both of them. Dr. Montgomery says you're the only one who..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I'll see them tomorrow," he said immediately. "Bring them to Mercy General at 9 a.m. Ask for my office, 16th floor, cardiac surgery wing." "Adam, We'll discuss everything tomorrow, Janaya. Right now, I need to review the literature and prepare. Send me their files. You can email them to my assistant, Lorelei. The address is on the hospital website." The line went dead, leaving Janaya staring at her phone. In the distance, she could hear her daughters giggling about something, their voices light and innocent. Tomorrow, she would have to walk into Adam's world again, bringing with her the 2 most precious pieces of her heart and asking him to save them. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. It should have been beautiful, but all Janaya could think about was the countdown that had started the moment Dr. Montgomery spoke those terrible words. 6 months, maybe less. She closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the only words that came were a desperate plea to the universe. "Let him save them. Let Adam save our babies, and I'll forgive him everything else." Even if she could never forgive herself for still loving him. Chapter 2. The Surgeon's Return. Adam Voges, CEO of Voges Medical Corporation, and one of the world's most renowned cardiac surgeons, had performed over 3,000 heart surgeries in his career while building a billion-dollar medical empire, but nothing had prepared him for the moment his assistant Lorelei knocked on his office door and spoke the words that would resurrect his buried past. "Dr. Voges, there's a Janaya Williams here with 2 children for your 9 o'clock consultation." The pen in his hand stopped moving across the patient chart he'd been reviewing. Janaya Williams. She'd kept her maiden name then. Part of him had wondered, during the countless sleepless nights when he'd searched for traces of her online, whether she'd remarried, whether someone else was tucking their daughters into bed, reading them stories, teaching them to ride bicycles. The thought had been both torturous and oddly comforting. At least they would have a father. "Send them in," he managed. his voice remarkably steady for a man whose world was about to tilt off its axis. Adam stood and straightened his white coat, a gesture more nervous than necessary. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office atop the Vosges medical tower, Seattle stretched out below him, the Space Needle piercing the morning clouds. He'd built this medical empire deliberately, high above the city, surrounded by the hum of success and the comfortable distance of wealth and professional achievement. In a few moments, all of that carefully constructed peace would crumble. The door opened, and time collapsed. Jania stepped through first, and Adam's breath caught. 7 years had only made her more beautiful, if such a thing were possible. Her dark hair was shorter now, falling in soft waves just past her shoulders, instead of the long cascade he remembered wrapping around his fingers. She wore a simple navy dress that emphasized her graceful neck and the elegant line of her collarbones. But it was her eyes that stopped him, those warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, now guarded and achingly familiar. Behind her came 2 small figures that made his heart stop entirely. They were perfect, absolutely, heartbreakingly perfect, with Jania's face and his eyes, those distinctive green eyes that had come from his Scottish grandmother. The bolder of the 2 stepped forward first, her chin lifted in defiance that was pure Jania. "Are you our daddy?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Serafina, he knew it had to be Serafina from the protective way she positioned herself slightly in front of her sister, stared at him with an intensity that reminded him of his own determination. Her dark hair was a riot of curls that suggested she'd already had one battle with a hairbrush that morning and won. Serafina. Jania's voice held a warning note, but Adam barely heard it. He was drowning in the reality of these 2 small humans who carried half his DNA, who had been growing and laughing and learning to read while he performed surgery after surgery on other people's children. Evangeline hung back, partially hidden behind Jania's skirt, but her eyes, his eyes, watched him with curious intensity. She was quieter, gentler somehow, with hair that fell in neat waves and clothes that suggested she hadn't spent the morning climbing furniture like her sister clearly had. "Hello," Adam said softly, crouching down to their level. His voice came out rougher than intended. "I'm Dr. Vosges, and yes, Serafina, I am your father." The words hung in the air like a confession. Evangeline stepped out from behind Jania, studying his face with the serious concentration of a child trying to solve a puzzle. "You have green eyes like us," she observed in a voice like music. "I do," Adam agreed, his throat tight. "I got them from my grandmother. Her name was Moira." "That's a pretty name," Evangeline whispered. "You're really tall," Serafina announced, still skeptical. "Mama said you were tall, but I thought maybe you shrunk." Despite everything, Adam felt his lips twitch. "People don't usually shrink, sweetheart. Mama said you went away because you didn't want to be our daddy anymore." Serafina's directness was devastating in its innocence. "But now you're going to fix our hearts?" Adam's eyes found Jania's over their daughters' heads. The pain in her expression told him everything he needed to know about the story she'd been forced to tell them, the lies she'd had to construct to explain his absence. The weight of that settled on his chest like a stone. "I'm going to do everything I can to help you feel better," he said carefully. "But first, I need to examine you both and look at your pictures from the other doctor. Would that be okay?" Evangeline nodded immediately, but Serafina crossed her arms. "Will it hurt?" "No more than when Dr. Montgomery listened to your heart yesterday." "Okay, but I go first." Evie doesn't like medical stuff. The protective instinct in her voice was so fierce, so reminiscent of Jania, that Adam had to blink back unexpected moisture in his eyes. These children had been raised by an extraordinary woman, and it showed in every gesture, every kindness between them. "Of course," he agreed. "Serafina first." The examination took 45 minutes, during which Adam fell completely and irrevocably in love with his daughters. Serafina chattered through her echocardiogram, asking questions about the machines and announcing that she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up, but not the kind that makes people sleepy, the kind that talks to people. Evangeline was quieter, but equally engaging, humming softly during her tests and asking whether the pictures of her heart were pretty enough to frame. The results were exactly what he'd feared. Both girls had severe hypoplastic left heart syndrome, complicated by additional structural abnormalities that made surgery incredibly risky. Without intervention, Dr. Montgomery's prognosis had been optimistic. They likely had 3 months, not 6. "Girls," Janaya said softly when the tests were complete, "why don't you sit in the waiting room with Miss Lorelei? She has some coloring books." "Are you going to talk about boring grown-up stuff?" Serafina asked suspiciously. "Very boring," Adam confirmed solemnly. "Medical words that are longer than your entire arm." "Ugh, come on, Evie, let's go color." The moment the door closed behind them, the careful professional distance Adam had maintained crumbled. He sank into his chair, the weight of what he'd just learned settling over him like lead. "They're dying," he said quietly. "I know." Janaya's voice was steady, but her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. "Can you save them?" Adam studied the echocardiogram images on his computer screen, his trained eye cataloguing every abnormality, every challenge the surgery would present. It would be the most complex procedure he'd ever attempted, requiring innovations he'd only theorized about. The margin for error was essentially non-existent. "Yes," he said finally, "it will require a modified Norwood with additional reconstruction, probably 3 separate procedures spaced months apart. The first surgery alone will take 12 hours, maybe more." "What are the risks?" He met her eyes directly, knowing she deserved the unvarnished truth. "Significant. There's a 30% chance of serious complications, a 15% chance of long-term cardiac disability, and—" He paused, the words sticking in his throat. "And what? A 10% chance that one or both of them won't survive the first surgery." Jania closed her eyes, her composure finally cracking. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and Adam's instinct was to reach for her, to pull her into his arms the way he had 1,000 times before, but 7 years and a mountain of hurt stood between them now. "When?" she asked. "I need to assemble a team, prepare the OR. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we're lucky, and their condition stays stable." "And if it doesn't stay stable?" "Then we operate immediately." Janaya nodded, wiping away the tear with the back of her hand. "What do you need from me?" The question was so purely practical, so focused on their children's welfare, despite the emotional chaos of their reunion, that Adam felt a surge of the old admiration he'd always had for her strength. "Full medical history, yours and mine, any genetic conditions in either family, and—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I need you to bring them here for daily monitoring until surgery. They'll need to stay close to the hospital." "I can't afford to stay in a hotel for weeks, Adam." "The hospital has family housing. It's free for surgical patients." She studied his face, probably wondering if he was bending rules for them. He was, but she didn't need to know that. "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" "Because they're my daughters." The answer was simple and completely inadequate for everything that lay between them. "You left." Her voice broke on the words. "You left us, Adam. You walked away when they were babies, and I never understood why. I still don't understand why." The pain in her voice was a knife to his chest. He wanted to explain everything, The lawsuit, the threats, the impossible choice between his career destroying their family or his absence preserving their future. But not here, not with their daughters coloring in the next room and her heart already shattered by their diagnosis. "I know," he said quietly, "and I know this doesn't fix anything between us. But Jania, they're innocent in all of this. Whatever I did, whatever mistakes I made, they don't deserve to pay for them. They've been paying for them their whole lives." The accusation hung in the air between them, true and devastating. Adam had missed first steps, first words, first days of school. He'd missed birthday parties and bedtime stories and all the tiny moments that made up a childhood. There was no defending that, no explanation that could erase 7 years of absence. "I know," he repeated, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But right now, I'm the best chance they have." Jania stood abruptly, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. "Save them," she said, her voice fierce. "Save my daughters, and we'll figure out the rest later." "Our daughters," Adam corrected softly. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "No, Adam. You gave up the right to call them ours 7 years ago. Save them first, then maybe we can talk about what comes next." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Adam alone with the echoes of his past and the terrifying responsibility of the future. On his desk, the medical files painted a grim picture, but all he could think about was Serafina's fierce protectiveness and Evangeline's shy smile. He pulled out his phone and dialed the OR scheduling desk. "This is Dr. Vogers. I need to book OR3 for a pediatric cardiac procedure, priority 1. And Patricia, clear my schedule for the next month. Everything else can wait." Because somewhere in the building, 2 little girls with his eyes and Jania's heart were coloring pictures, unaware that their father was about to fight for their lives. And maybe, if he was very lucky, for a chance to earn back the family he'd lost. Chapter 3. 7 years of silence. 7 years earlier. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Adam rushing to make coffee, while Jania nursed Evangeline and Serafina babbled happily in her high chair, her chubby fists wrapped around pieces of banana. The simple domesticity of it, the way morning light streamed through their small kitchen window and painted everything golden, should have been a shield against what was coming. "Mail's here," Jania called from the living room, Evangeline's tiny head nestled against her shoulder. At 1 year old, the twins were just beginning to develop distinct personalities, Serafina bold and demanding, Evangeline gentle and observant. Adam had been documenting every milestone obsessively, as if his camera could somehow hold on to these precious moments forever. He'd been so naive. The envelope bore the letterhead of Harper, Michaels and Associates, attorneys at law. Inside, papers that would destroy everything he thought he knew about his future. Notice of malpractice suit. Dr. Adam Vogers, defendant, wrongful death, gross negligence, $7 million in damages. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, age 68, grandmother of 5. She'd come to him with what should have been a routine valve replacement, post-surgical complications, infection, multiple organ failure, death. Adam's hands had shaken as he read the details, each accusation a knife to his chest. The family alleged he'd been drinking before surgery, a lie so outrageous it would have been laughable if not for the sworn affidavit from a nurse claiming she'd smelled alcohol on his breath. Fabricated evidence, false testimony, a family desperate for someone to blame for their devastating loss. "Adam?" Jania's voice had been soft with concern. "Baby, what is it?" He'd looked up to find her standing in the doorway, Evangeline sleeping against her shoulder, worry etched across her beautiful face. Behind her, Serafina was attempting to feed banana to her stuffed elephant, creating a mess that would normally have made him laugh. "It's nothing," he'd lied, shoving the papers back into the envelope. "Just hospital paperwork." Present day. Adam stood at the window of his office, watching the morning bustle 16 floors below, but seeing instead that terrible Tuesday when his world had begun to unravel. The lawsuit had dragged on for 8 months, 8 months of depositions and accusations, of reporters calling his house, and photographers lurking outside both his home and the corporate headquarters of his fledgling medical device company. 8 months of watching Janiyah grow thinner and more anxious, of seeing the strain in her eyes every time his phone rang. The irony wasn't lost on him now. The company he'd started to revolutionize cardiac care had made him wealthy beyond measure, but it had also made him a target. The medical board had investigated and cleared him completely. The hospital had stood behind him. Every piece of evidence had supported his version of events. But the damage had been done, to his reputation, to his confidence, and most devastatingly, to his family's peace. His phone buzzed. A text from Janiyah. "Girls asking when they can see you again. Serafina wants to show you her math homework." The simple message sent a pain through his chest that was sharper than any scalpel. He'd missed 7 years of math homework, of proud moments and scraped knees and all the ordinary magic that made up childhood. 7 years earlier. The breaking point had come on a rain-soaked evening in March. Adam had arrived home to find Janiyah sitting at their kitchen table, the twins finally asleep after a difficult day. She'd been staring at an envelope in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "They sent it here," she'd whispered, "to our home address. The girls' pictures. Adam, they have pictures of our babies." The envelope contained photos of Serafina and Evangeline at the park, playing in their front yard, sleeping in their stroller outside the grocery store. Professional surveillance photos with a note. "Your husband killed my mother. Now you know what it feels like to have someone you love watched." Janiyah had been sobbing by then, great gasping breaths that shook her entire body. I can't live like this anymore. Every time the phone rings, every time someone knocks on the door, I'm so scared, Adam. I'm scared they're going to hurt the girls." He'd held her while she cried, his own heart breaking with every tear. The lawsuit was destroying everything good in their lives, poisoning every moment with fear and uncertainty. His lawyer had warned him it could go on for years. Appeals, countersuits, endless legal wrangling that would keep them in the public eye indefinitely. That night, after Janiyah had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, Adam had made the most difficult decision of his life. He'd written her a letter, pages and pages explaining everything, telling her how much he loved her, how leaving was the only way to protect them all. He'd planned to leave it where she'd find it in the morning, after he was gone. But his mother had arrived unexpectedly at dawn, ostensibly to help with the babies, but really to deliver her own ultimatum. "This nonsense has gone on long enough," Montgomery Vosges had announced, her patrician voice cutting through the morning quiet like ice. "The Vosges name has stood for excellence in medicine for 4 generations, and now you've built $1 billion company on that reputation. I will not have it dragged through the mud by some gold-digging family looking for a payout. Mother, please, the girls are sleeping. Those children would be better off without this chaos in their lives. Janiyah is a lovely girl, but she's not equipped for this kind of scrutiny. She's not one of us, Adam." The casual cruelty in her voice had made him sick. "Don't talk about my family that way. I'm talking about reality. This lawsuit could destroy your career, your reputation, everything we've built. Is a pretty face really worth throwing that all away? She's my wife. They're my daughters. And they'll be fine without you. Better than fine, they'll be safe. The harassment will stop once you're gone. The lawyers have already indicated they'll settle quietly if you disappear from the picture." Adam had stared at his mother in horror. "You've been talking to their lawyers?" "Someone has to think rationally here. I've arranged everything. A position in Seattle, far enough away that the media circus won't follow. A chance to rebuild your career without this baggage dragging you down. Baggage? His voice had been dangerously quiet. You're talking about my children. I'm talking about your future. Choose wisely, Adam. You can have them, or you can have medicine. You cannot have both. She'd left his letter on the kitchen counter when she'd gone, taking it without permission, sealing his goodbye in her purse like stolen treasure. For 7 years, he'd assumed Janiyah had chosen not to respond to his explanation. 7 years of believing she'd simply been relieved to see him go. Present day. Dr. Voges. Lorelei's voice interrupted his memories. The surgical team meeting is in 5 minutes. Adam turned from the window, pushing the past back into its carefully sealed compartment. He had work to do, the most important work of his life. In the conference room, 10 of the best pediatric specialists in the country waited to discuss how to save his daughters' lives. The irony wasn't lost on him. His mother's betrayal had cost him 7 years with Serafina and Evangeline, but it had also forced him to become the surgeon he was today. The position in Seattle had led to groundbreaking research, innovative techniques that made him uniquely qualified to attempt their complex surgery. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Janiyah. Evie had nightmare about robots in her chest. Told her they were good robots that would help her run faster. She wants to know if you can make them pink. Despite everything, Adam smiled. He typed back, "Tell her the good robots can be any color she wants, even sparkly pink." The response came immediately. "She says you're okay for a daddy she just met." The words hit him like a blessing and a curse combined. He was their father, but he was also a stranger. 7 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and Christmas mornings had been stolen from him. From all of them. His phone rang. Janiyah's number. "Hello? Adam, Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. "I wanted to thank you for earlier, for being so gentle with them. I know this can't be easy for you either." "They're incredible," he said honestly. "You've done an amazing job raising them. I had help. My brother Oren, my friend Maeve. It takes a village, you know." He didn't know, actually. He'd missed the village, missed being part of their support system. But he'd built his own empire in the meantime. Voges Medical Corporation now employed over 2,000 people and had revolutionized cardiac care worldwide. The wealth meant nothing without his family, but it did mean he could give them everything they'd ever need. "Janiyah, I don't," she interrupted softly. "Not yet. Let's just focus on getting them through this first. Everything else can wait. Can I ask you something?" "Okay. The letter I left. Did you—" He couldn't finish the question, afraid of the answer. "What letter?" The words hit him like a physical blow. She'd never seen it. 7 years of believing she'd rejected his explanation, and she'd never even known he'd tried to tell her the truth. "Adam?" "What letter?" ? "I have to go," he managed. "The surgical team is waiting." "Adam!" He hung up before she could finish, his hands shaking with a rage that had nowhere to go. His mother had taken even that from them, the chance for Janiyah to understand, to maybe forgive him. For 7 years, she'd believed he'd simply abandoned them without explanation. A knock on his door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Dr. Voges, they're ready for you." Adam straightened his coat and walked toward the conference room, toward the meeting that would determine whether his daughters lived or died. Behind him, his phone buzzed with another text from Janiyah, probably demanding answers about the letter he'd mentioned. But first, before he could explain the past, he had to secure their future. Everything else, forgiveness, understanding, the slim possibility of redemption, would have to wait until after he'd fought for their lives and won. Because losing them now, after finding them again, was simply not an option. He'd already lost 7 years to pride and misunderstanding and his mother's manipulations. He would not lose a single day more. Chapter 4. Testing Waters. The Ronald McDonald family house sat quietly in the shadow of Mercy General Hospital, its cheerful red shutters and carefully tended garden creating an oasis of warmth amid the clinical sterility of the medical district. Room 247 had become Jania's entire world. 2 twin beds covered in rainbow quilts, a small kitchenette, and a window that offered a direct view of the cardiac surgery wing, where Adam worked 16 floors above. "Mama, can we go see the fish again?" Evangeline asked from where she sat coloring at the small table by the window. 3 days into their hospital stay, she'd become obsessed with the large aquarium in the pediatric ward, particularly a bright yellow tang fish she'd named Sunshine. "After your tests this afternoon, baby," Jania replied, folding yet another load of laundry. Living out of suitcases was challenging enough without factoring in the emotional upheaval of their situation. "Is Daddy coming today?" The question came from Serafina, who was sprawled across her bed, reading a picture book with characteristic intensity. She'd started calling Adam Daddy after the second day, despite Jania's careful attempts to encourage the more formal Dr. Voges. "He's not," Jania began, then stopped herself. Was Adam their daddy now? The title felt foreign after 7 years of careful explanations about their father being away, but watching him with the girls over the past week had stirred something she'd tried to keep buried. A soft knock interrupted her internal struggle. "Come in," she called, already knowing who it would be. Adam appeared in the doorway, wearing scrubs instead of his usual formal attire, his hair slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He'd been finding reasons to check on them every day, reviewing test results that could have been discussed over the phone, adjusting medications that didn't need adjusting, ensuring their comfort with an attention to detail that went far beyond medical necessity. "Good morning," he said, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Jania. "How did everyone sleep?" "Evie had bad dreams again," Serafina announced, before Jania could answer. "She keeps dreaming about machines with scary faces." Adam's expression grew concerned as he crouched beside Evangeline's chair. "Tell me about these dreams, sweetheart." Evangeline looked up from her coloring, a picture of a fish that bore a striking resemblance to Sunshine, and studied Adam's face with the serious concentration she brought to everything. "The machines want to eat my heart," she said matter-of-factly, "but I told them my heart belongs to Mama and Sarah and now you, so they can't have it." The simple statement hit Adam like a physical blow. Jania watched his face transform, vulnerability replacing his usual professional composure. "Your heart does belong to us," he said softly, "and we're never going to let anything bad happen to it. The machines I use, they're friendly machines. They help hearts get stronger, not scary at all." "Really?" "Really. In fact, would you like to see them? I could show you the room where I work, explain how everything helps instead of hurts." Evangeline's eyes lit up. "Can Sarah come too?" "Of course. And Mama, if she wants." "I want to see the robots," Serafina declared, abandoning her book. "And I want to know if they have names." "They do have names," Adam confirmed solemnly. "Very important names that help me remember what each one does." Jania watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and heartache. Adam had a natural gift with children. Patient, respectful, never talking down to them. She could see glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who used to spend hours answering her endless questions about medicine with the same gentle thoroughness. "We should get ready for your morning labs first," she interjected, needing to maintain some semblance of routine. "Dr. Imogen will be here soon." "Actually," Adam said, standing slowly, "I've rearranged the schedule slightly. The labs can wait until this afternoon. I thought we might spend the morning in the surgical wing, then maybe visit the chapel. It's quite beautiful and very peaceful." The suggestion was clearly meant for Jania as much as the girls. Over the past week, their conversations had been strictly medical. Test results, surgical schedules, medication adjustments. They'd maintained careful distance, never alone together for more than a few minutes, never discussing anything more personal than the girl's immediate needs. "The chapel sounds nice," Evangeline said shyly. "I like quiet places." Then it settled. Adam's smile was gentle. "Shall we go exploring?" The cardiac surgery wing was a revelation of organized chaos. Adam led them through corridors lined with sophisticated equipment, past nurses who greeted him with obvious respect and affection. In the main OR, he showed the girls the various machines they'd been dreaming about: the heart-lung bypass, the monitoring equipment, the surgical tools that looked less frightening when explained in terms of tiny fixing instruments. "This one's called Hermes," Adam explained, indicating a sleek monitoring machine, "because it carries messages between your heart and the doctors, just like the messenger god in old stories." "Like the mail?" Serafina asked. "Exactly like the mail, but much faster." Evangeline had been quiet during most of the tour, absorbing everything with wide eyes. Finally, she tugged on Adam's scrub top. "Daddy, will you be the one fixing my heart?" The title came so naturally from her lips that Adam had to pause before answering. "Yes, sweetheart, I'll be right there with you the whole time." "Will it hurt?" "You'll be sleeping," he promised, "like the deepest, most peaceful sleep you've ever had. And when you wake up, your heart will be much stronger. Strong enough to run really fast? Strong enough to do whatever you want to do." They spent another hour in the Surgical Education Center, where Adam let both girls practice with child-safe versions of surgical instruments on teddy bear patients. Serafina approached the task with characteristic determination, while Evangeline was more cautious but equally engaged. "I think Mr. Bear is going to be fine," she announced solemnly after carefully bandaging his chest. "Excellent work, Doctor." "Evangeline," Adam said formally, and she giggled with delight. By the time they reached the hospital chapel, both girls were visibly tired but happier than Janaya had seen them since the diagnosis. The chapel was indeed beautiful, a non-denominational space with soaring windows that bathed everything in soft-colored light. Wooden pews faced a simple altar adorned with flowers from the hospital's garden. "It's pretty," Evangeline whispered, automatically lowering her voice in the sacred space. "Can we sit for a minute?" Serafina asked. "My legs are tired." They settled into a pew near the back, the girls between Adam and Janaya. The silence was comfortable, filled with the subtle sounds of the hospital beyond the heavy wooden doors. After a few minutes, both twins began to droop with exhaustion. "They didn't sleep well last night," Janaya murmured to Adam. "Too many new sounds, new environment." "The nightmares?" "Those too." Evangeline woke up crying twice. "Serafina pretends to be fine, but I know she's scared." Adam nodded, his eyes on their daughters' peaceful faces. Evangeline had curled against Janaya's side, while Serafina had somehow gravitated toward Adam, her head resting against his arm. "They're so beautiful," he said quietly. "Sometimes I look at them, and I can't believe I almost missed all of this." "You did miss it," Jania replied, not unkindly but with the honesty that had always been one of her defining traits. "You missed their first words, first steps, first days of school. You missed chicken pox and Christmas mornings, and the time Serafina broke her arm climbing the neighbor's fence." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of accumulated hurt. Adam closed his eyes, accepting the pain of each missed milestone like penance. "I know," he said simply, "and I know saying I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it." They sat in silence for several more minutes. Around them, the chapel held its peace, offering sanctuary not just from the medical urgency beyond its doors, but from the complicated emotions neither of them knew how to navigate. "Adam," Jania said finally, her voice barely audible, "earlier on the phone you mentioned a letter." He turned to look at her directly, noting the way afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes, a detail he'd somehow forgotten during their years apart. "I wrote you a letter," he said carefully, "the night before I left, explaining everything, the lawsuit, the threats, why I thought leaving was the only way to protect you and the girls. I never got any letter. I know that now." His voice carried a bitterness that had nothing to do with her. "My mother took it. She arranged everything, the job in Seattle, the clean break, the settlement with the family who was suing me. She convinced me that disappearing was the only way to keep you all safe." Jania stared at him, processing this information. "Your mother knew about the girls all these years?" "She knew everything. The lawsuit, the harassment, how much it was destroying our lives. She thought they'd be better off without me." "And you believed her?" The question was asked without accusation, but Adam felt the weight of it nonetheless. "I was 28 years old, facing the destruction of everything I'd worked for. My career, my reputation, our family's safety. It was all crumbling. When she showed me a way to make it stop, to give you peace." He trailed off, unable to finish. "You gave up. I thought I was saving you." Evangeline stirred against Jania's side, murmuring something in her sleep. Both adults fell silent, unwilling to disturb the rare moment of peace their daughters had found. "The harassment really stopped?" Jania asked eventually. "Within a month of my leaving, the family settled quietly. The media moved on to other stories. You were safe. But we weren't whole." The simple statement contained 7 years of single motherhood, of explaining Daddy's absence, of watching other families and wondering what might have been. "No," Adam agreed quietly. "You weren't whole, and neither was I." A figure appeared in the chapel doorway, a man in clerical collar with kind eyes and prematurely grey hair. He approached quietly, clearly recognizing that he was witnessing something private and fragile. "I'm Father Caspian," he said softly. "I just wanted to check that you're finding everything you need. The chapel is available whenever you'd like to use it." "Thank you," Jania replied. "It's very peaceful here." "Sacred spaces have a way of making room for difficult conversations," Caspian observed gently. "Sometimes we need somewhere safe to speak truths that are too heavy for everyday places." His words seemed to hang in the air after he left, a benediction and a challenge combined. Jania looked down at Serafina's sleeping face, then at Evangeline, then finally at Adam. "I don't know how to forgive you," she said quietly. "I don't even know if I want to. But I know our daughters need you now, and I know you love them. I do love them, more than I knew was possible." "Then that's enough for now. Love them, save them, and maybe we can figure out the rest afterward." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was the first crack in the wall between them, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 5. The Weight of Truth. The crash cart alarm shattered the peaceful afternoon like glass breaking against stone, its urgent electronic wail echoing through the pediatric wing and straight into Jania's worst nightmares. She'd been in the family kitchen making sandwiches when the sound began, that particular combination of beeps and announcements that meant someone's child was fighting for their life. Her hands had stilled on the peanut butter jar as she waited for the inevitable announcement that would either bring relief or destroy her world. "Code Blue, Pediatric ICU, Room 12. Code Blue, Pediatric ICU, Room 12. Room 12. Evangeline's room. The peanut butter jar hit the floor as Jania ran, her feet moving before her mind could fully process what was happening. The hallways blurred past her, concerned faces of other families, nurses rushing with equipment, the controlled chaos that surrounded every medical emergency. By the time she reached the PQ, a crowd had already gathered outside Evangeline's room. Through the glass, she could see her daughter's small body surrounded by machines and medical personnel. Evangeline's dark hair was spread across the white pillow like spilled ink, her face pale and still. Too still. "Ma'am, you need to wait outside," a nurse said gently, catching Jania's arm as she tried to push past. "That's my daughter. That's my baby." "I know. Dr. Voges is with her now. He'll update you as soon as possible." Adam. Through the crowd of medical staff, Jania caught a glimpse of him leaning over Evangeline's bed, his hands moving with swift precision as he worked. His face was a mask of professional concentration, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he touched their daughter as if she were made of spun glass. What happened? The voice belonged to Serafina, who had appeared at Jania's side with Maeve close behind. Her best friend must have brought Serafina from the playroom when the alarm started. "I don't know, baby." Jania pulled Serafina close, feeling her daughter's small body trembling against her side. "The doctors are helping Evie right now. Is she going to be okay?" Serafina's voice was small, all her usual bravado stripped away by fear. "She's going to be fine," Jania said with a certainty she didn't feel. "Daddy's with her." The word slipped out without conscious thought. Daddy. When had that become natural? When had Adam transformed from the man who'd abandoned them into the person they turned to in crisis? Jania. She turned to find a tall man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes approaching them. He wore scrubs and a white coat, clearly another doctor, but his face was unfamiliar. "I'm Doctor Hendricks," he said, extending his hand. "Adam's former colleague. I came as soon as I heard about Evangeline." "Former colleague. From Johns Hopkins. We did our cardiothoracic fellowship together." He paused, studying her face with obvious recognition. "You probably don't remember me, but I was at your wedding. Beautiful ceremony." Adam couldn't stop smiling. The memory hit her unexpectedly. She did remember him now, younger then, laughing with Adam at the reception, toasting their future with champagne and optimism, back when their future had seemed infinite and unbreakable. "Dr. Hendricks," she managed. "Thank you for coming. Adam called me the moment he got your case. He's assembled an incredible team, Jania. If anyone can help your daughters, it's him." Hendricks glanced toward Evangeline's room, where the controlled urgency continued. "I have to say, I'm amazed he's taken the case at all. After what happened with the Hartwell lawsuit, he swore he'd never operate on anyone he loved again." The words hit Jania like a physical blow. "The what?" Hendricks's face went pale as he realized his mistake. I assumed you knew about the malpractice case, the reason he left Baltimore." "He left Baltimore because of a lawsuit." Jania's voice was barely audible. "The Eleanor Hartwell case. It was completely fabricated. The family was looking for someone to blame for their loss, and Adam was an easy target. Young, brilliant, without the political connections to protect himself." Hendricks looked stricken. "Jania, I'm sorry. I thought, after all this time, I assumed he'd told you." The world tilted sideways. 7 years of believing Adam had simply abandoned them. 7 years of constructing explanations for his absence, and it had all been built on a lie. Not his lie. Her own assumptions, her pride, her refusal to consider that there might have been reasons beyond simple selfishness. "The harassment was terrible," Hendricks continued, seemingly unaware of the devastation his words were causing. "Reporters calling at all hours, photographers following you to the grocery store. I remember Adam saying the stress was destroying your family, that you were afraid to let the twins play in your own yard." "Mama!" Serafina's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Mama, you look funny." Jania blinked, bringing her daughter's concerned face back into focus. Around them, the controlled chaos of the hospital continued, but all she could hear was the echo of Hendricks's words. He swore he'd never operate on anyone he loved again. "I need some air," she managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Janaya," Hendricks started. "Please watch Serafina. I need a minute." She walked blindly down the corridor, past concerned nurses and other families dealing with their own crises. The elevator seemed to take forever, and when the doors finally opened onto the hospital's garden level, she stumbled outside into the afternoon air. The garden was peaceful, designed to offer respite from the intensity inside. Carefully tended flower beds surrounded wooden benches, and a small fountain provided the gentle sound of running water. Jania sank onto the nearest bench, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. 7 years. 7 years of single motherhood, of explaining to the twins why Daddy wasn't coming home, of building a life around his absence. 7 years of believing he hadn't loved them enough to stay, and all of it based on a misunderstanding so profound it took her breath away. Her phone buzzed, a text from Maeve. "Evie is stable. Adam wants to talk to you." Jania stared at the message, trying to reconcile the man who was fighting to save their daughter's life with the one she'd believed had simply walked away from his responsibilities. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. By the time she made it back to the PICU, Evangeline was awake and stable, though still surrounded by monitoring equipment. Adam was at her bedside, holding her small hand and speaking to her in low, reassuring tones. "Hi, Mama," Evangeline said weakly when she spotted Janaya in the doorway. "I had a scary dream, but Daddy made it better." "I'm so glad you're okay, baby." Janaya approached the bed carefully, noting the new IV lines and the additional monitors. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, but Daddy says my heart just got confused for a little while. He fixed it." Janaya's eyes met Adam's over their daughter's head. His face was drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like guilt. "Can I talk to you?" he asked quietly. "Outside." She nodded, kissing Evangeline's forehead before following him into the hallway. Serafina was curled up in Maeve's lap in the waiting area, finally asleep after the stress of the afternoon. "She had what we call a hypoxic episode," Adam explained once they were far enough away from the room. "Her oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. We had to intubate temporarily, but she's breathing on her own now. Is this what we can expect? Before the surgery?" "It's possible. Her condition is deteriorating faster than I'd hoped. We may need to move up the timeline." Jania nodded, processing the medical information while her mind continued to reel from Hendricks's revelations. "Adam, I need to ask you something." "Of course." Dr. Hendricks mentioned a lawsuit. Eleanor Hartwell. He said that's why you left Baltimore. Adam's face went completely still. In the distance, she could hear the normal sounds of the hospital, phones ringing, conversations, the subtle hum of life-saving equipment. But between them, the silence stretched like a chasm. "Yes," he said finally. "He said you were harassed, that our family was threatened." "Yes, and you never told me. I tried to protect you from it." The simple statement unleashed 7 years of buried hurt and confusion. "Protect me? Adam, you disappeared. You left us with no explanation, no goodbye, no way to reach you. I thought you just didn't want us anymore." "Never." The word came out fierce, desperate. "I have never, not for one single day, stopped wanting you. Wanting them." "Then why?" The question broke on a sob. "Why didn't you fight for us? Why didn't you trust me enough to let me choose whether to stay and face it together?" Adam's composure finally cracked. "Because I was 28 years old and terrified. Because every day brought new threats, new accusations, new ways they could hurt you to get to me. Because I watched you stop eating, stop sleeping, start jumping every time the phone rang. Because Serafina asked why strangers were taking pictures of her at the playground, and I didn't know how to explain that her father was being accused of killing someone." The words came out in a rush, 7 years of suppressed anguish finally finding voice. My mother convinced me that leaving was the only way to make it stop. She showed me documentation proving that my presence was escalating the harassment. She said if I disappeared, you could have normal lives, safe lives. Your mother knew. She arranged everything. The job in Seattle, the settlement with the Hartwell family. She even... He paused, his face twisting with old anger. She intercepted the letter I wrote you, the one explaining everything. Janiyah stared at him, pieces of a 7-year-old puzzle finally clicking into place. You wrote me a letter. Pages and pages, everything I couldn't say face to face. How much I loved you, how leaving was killing me, how I hoped someday you'd understand that I was trying to protect you. And she took it. She thought she was saving my career, saving the family reputation. She never understood that losing you and the girls was worse than losing everything else combined. They stood in the hospital corridor, surrounded by the controlled chaos of medical life, finally speaking truths that should have been shared 7 years ago. Janiyah felt as if she was seeing Adam clearly for the first time since he'd walked back into their lives, not the man who'd abandoned them, but the one who'd made an impossible choice based on love and fear and terrible advice. I need to check on Evangeline, she said finally, her voice unsteady. Janiyah, not now. I can't. I need to process this. I need to focus on the girls right now. Adam nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. I'll be in my office if you need anything. Anything at all. She walked back toward Evangeline's room, her mind reeling with the weight of revelations that changed everything she thought she knew about their past. Behind her, she could hear Adam speaking quietly to one of the nurses, his voice professional and controlled, despite the emotional earthquake they'd just experienced. Through the glass, she could see Evangeline sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and strong. For now, that was enough. The larger questions, forgiveness, understanding, the possibility of moving forward, would have to wait. But for the first time in 7 years, Janiyah began to understand that the man she'd loved hadn't simply walked away. He'd been trying, in his flawed and broken way, to save them all. Chapter 6. Hearts in Harmony. The surgery schedule arrived on Tuesday morning like an official summons, delivered by Nurse Aurelia with the kind of gentle solemnity reserved for life-altering news. Dr. Voges has scheduled both procedures for next Friday, she explained, her warm brown eyes full of compassion as she handed Janiyah the paperwork. Serafina at 7 a.m., Evangeline at 2 p.m. He wants them spaced far enough apart that he can give each surgery his complete attention. Janiyah stared at the papers, the clinical language failing to capture the enormity of what those dates represented. In 10 days, her daughters would undergo surgery that would either save their lives or destroy her world entirely. Both on the same day, she asked, her voice smaller than intended. Dr. Voges felt it would be less traumatic for the family to have everything concentrated. He's also arranged for you to stay in the private family suite during the procedures. It's more comfortable, and you'll have direct communication with the surgical team. After Aurelia left, Janiyah sat in the quiet of their family housing room, watching her daughters play an elaborate game involving stuffed animals and a makeshift hospital they'd constructed from cardboard boxes. The normalcy of their play stood in sharp contrast to the weight of what was coming. "Mama, Mr. Elephant needs heart surgery too," Evangeline announced seriously, holding up her favorite stuffed animal. "But don't worry, Daddy's going to fix him." The casual confidence in her voice was heartbreaking. To Evangeline, Adam had become a magical figure who could fix anything, make any fear disappear with gentle explanations and patient answers. The trust she placed in him was absolute and terrifying. "That's right, baby," Janiyah managed. "Daddy's very good at fixing hearts." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Adam appeared in the doorway, no longer in his formal white coat, but in jeans and a dark blue sweater that made his eyes look impossibly green. The casual clothes made him seem younger, more like the man she'd fallen in love with during those late nights in medical school when they'd studied together until dawn. "I thought we might go for a walk," he said. "Both girls have been inside too much lately." "Can we see the ducks?" Serafina asked immediately, abandoning her cardboard hospital. "You promised we could see the ducks." The hospital grounds included a small pond that had become one of Serafina's favorite discoveries. Adam had mentioned it casually 3 days ago, and she'd been lobbying for a visit ever since. "Ducks it is," Adam agreed solemnly. "But first, everyone needs jackets. Seattle weather is unpredictable." They made a small parade through the hospital corridors, Adam carrying the bag with emergency medications, Janaya holding Evangeline's hand, and Serafina skipping ahead with the boundless energy that never seemed to be dimmed by her heart condition. Other families smiled as they passed, recognizing the universal scene of parents trying to maintain normalcy in an abnormal situation. The pond was peaceful, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens and wooden benches. A family of mallards paddled near the shore, occasionally diving for food, while their ducklings followed in an uneven line. "Look, Evie!" Serafina pointed excitedly. "Baby ducks!" Evangeline clapped her hands together, her face lighting up with pure joy. "They're so little! Can we feed them?" "I brought some crackers," Adam said, producing a small bag from his pocket. "But we have to be very gentle, and let them come to us." They settled on a bench near the water's edge, the girls between their parents, crumbling crackers and tossing small pieces toward the eager ducks. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and for a moment they looked like any ordinary family enjoying a simple outing. "Daddy," Evangeline said softly, leaning against Adam's side, "will you still visit us after you fix our hearts?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Adam's arm tightened around her small shoulders, and Janaya saw him swallow hard before answering. "I would like to visit you every day if your mama says it's okay," he said carefully. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Evangeline said immediately. "You could read us stories and help with homework and maybe teach us about hearts." "And come to my soccer games," Serafina added. "I'm going to play soccer when my heart is fixed. Coach Martinez says I have good kicks." "I would love to come to your soccer games," Adam promised, his voice thick with emotion. Janaya watched this exchange from behind her sunglasses, her heart performing complicated acrobatics in her chest. The easy affection between Adam and their daughters was both beautiful and painful. Beautiful because it was genuine, painful because it highlighted everything they'd all missed during the years of separation. They spent an hour by the pond, talking and laughing and feeding the increasingly bold ducks. Adam told stories about the hospital's history, pointing out architectural details and sharing gentle medical facts that made everything seem less frightening. The girls absorbed every word, storing away information about their father like precious treasures. "Dr. Voges," a voice interrupted their peaceful afternoon. A woman approached from the direction of the hospital, tall, elegant, with graying hair and intelligent brown eyes. "I'm Eloan Matthews, the family social worker. I was hoping to speak with you and Ms. Williams." Adam stood immediately, his posture shifting into professional mode. "Of course. Girls, can you keep watching the ducks for a few minutes while we talk to Ms. Eloan?" They moved to a bench slightly apart from the children, close enough to supervise but far enough for private conversation. Eloan's presence carried the weight of official involvement, the kind that made Janaya instinctively protective. "I wanted to check in with your family before the surgery," Eloan began gently. "Major medical procedures can be stressful on family dynamics, and we want to ensure everyone has the support they need." "We're managing well," Janaya said carefully. "I'm sure you are. But I notice from the intake forms that this is a rather unique situation. Dr. Vogus is both the surgeon and the children's biological father, but hasn't been involved in their care previously. That presents some complex emotional territory. Janiyah felt her defenses rising. Adam is an excellent surgeon. His personal relationship to the girls doesn't change his professional qualifications. I absolutely agree, Elowen said quickly. Dr. Vogus has an outstanding reputation. I'm more concerned about the emotional impact on everyone involved. Reconciling family relationships under medical stress can be overwhelming. We're taking things one step at a time, Adam said diplomatically. Elowen studied them both with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen families in crisis many times before. Have you considered what happens after the surgery? Assuming successful outcomes, these children will need ongoing cardiac care for the rest of their lives. Are you prepared for that level of ongoing connection? The question hung in the air between them, highlighting the elephant they'd all been carefully avoiding. What happened when the immediate crisis was over, when the girls were healthy and the medical emergency no longer provided a framework for their interactions? We'll figure it out, Janiyah said finally. I'm sure you will, but I'd like to schedule some family counseling sessions, just to provide a safe space for processing the emotional complexity of your situation. Children are remarkably resilient, but they also pick up on adult tensions more than we often realize. After Elowen left them with appointment cards and gentle encouragement, Adam and Janiyah sat in silence, watching their daughters chase a particularly brave duck around the edge of the pond. She's right, you know, Adam said quietly, about the complexity. I know. I don't want to complicate their lives more than I already have. Janiyah turned to look at him directly. Adam, they love you. In 1 week, they've completely accepted you as their father. That's not complicated. That's beautiful. And terrifying, he admitted. What if I let them down again? Then you'll figure out how to make it right. That's what parents do. The simple statement seemed to surprise him. Parents? You are their parent, whether that fits neatly into our situation or not. Biology doesn't stop being biology because of circumstances. They were interrupted by Serafina's excited voice. Mama! Daddy, come see! The mama duck is teaching the babies to dive! They spent the rest of the afternoon watching duck lessons and listening to their daughter's excited commentary. As the sun began to set, they walked slowly back toward the hospital, the girl's energy finally beginning to flag. Daddy, Evangeline said sleepily as Adam carried her through the lobby, will you read us a story tonight? If Mama says it's okay. Janiyah nodded, surprised by how natural the domestic arrangement felt. 30 minutes, then teeth brushing and bed. In their family housing room, Adam settled into the chair between the twin beds while Janiyah busied herself with the evening routine, laying out clothes for the next day, checking medications, preparing the small comforts that would help the girls sleep peacefully. She paused in folding laundry when she heard Adam's voice change, becoming softer and more intimate. He was reading The Velveteen Rabbit, his deep voice gentle as he brought the story to life. Both girls listened with rapt attention, Evangeline clutching her stuffed elephant and Serafina curled on her side with her thumb near her mouth, a comfort habit she'd never quite outgrown. Real isn't how you are made, Adam read. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. The words seemed to hang in the air with extra meaning. Janiyah found herself watching Adam's face as he read, noting the way his expression softened when he looked at their daughters, the careful way he turned each page as if the book were precious. After the story ended and teeth were brushed and goodnight kisses distributed, Janiyah walked Adam to the door. He paused in the doorway, clearly reluctant to leave. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me be part of this. Thank you for saving their lives. I haven't saved them yet. You will. The confidence in her voice surprised them both. After he left, Janiyah finished her evening routine, checking on both girls one final time before settling into her own bed. As she reached for her phone to set the alarm, something fell from her purse, a small photo worn around the edges from years of handling. It was a picture from their wedding day, her and Adam dancing at their reception, both of them laughing at something one of their friends had said. They looked impossibly young and hopelessly in love, their future spread out before them like a promise. She'd carried this photo through 7 years of single motherhood, unable to throw it away despite the pain it sometimes caused. Tonight, looking at their younger selves, she felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of understanding. They'd been so young, so unprepared for the complexities that life would throw at them. Adam had made a terrible choice based on fear and bad advice, but his motives had been love, not abandonment. "Mama," Evangeline's voice was sleepy from across the room. "Is Daddy going to be here tomorrow?" "Yes, baby. Daddy will be here." "Good," Evangeline murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "I like it when he's here." Janiyah stared at the photo for a long time before finally tucking it back into her purse. Outside their window, the lights of the cardiac surgery wing glowed against the night sky. And somewhere in that building, Adam was probably reviewing surgical plans and preparing to fight for their daughters' lives. For the first time in 7 years, the thought of their future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like a possibility. Chapter 7. Before the Storm. The VIP family suite on the 15th floor felt like a sanctuary suspended between earth and sky, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Seattle's lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Room 1547 was typically reserved for the families of high-profile patients, but Adam had quietly arranged for them to spend the night before surgery in its comfortable embrace. 2 bedrooms connected by a spacious living area, a small kitchen, and most importantly, the sense of being temporarily insulated from the medical urgency that would consume tomorrow. "This is like a fancy hotel," Serafina announced, immediately claiming the window seat and pressing her nose against the glass. "Look, Evie, you can see the whole city." Evangeline joined her sister at the window, both girls mesmerized by the urban landscape spread below them. Their excited chatter filled the suite with the kind of innocent joy that made Janiyah's chest ache, knowing that in 12 hours, both of her babies would be fighting for their lives under surgical lights. "Doctor, Voges said we could order anything we want for dinner," Janiyah said, forcing lightness into her voice. "What sounds good?" "Pizza," both girls chorused immediately. "With extra cheese," Serafina added. "And maybe some of those little pepperonis that look like tiny circles," Evangeline said thoughtfully. Adam appeared in the doorway, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing jeans and a soft grey sweater instead of his usual medical attire. The casual clothes made him look younger, more like the man who used to build blanket forts in their tiny apartment during residency. "I heard someone mention pizza," he said, his voice carefully cheerful. "That sounds perfect for tonight." They spent the evening creating the kind of memory that felt both precious and fragile, sharing pizza around the suite's dining table, while the girls told Adam elaborate stories about their stuffed animals' adventures and their dreams for after surgery. Serafina described the soccer team she planned to join, complete with detailed strategies for scoring goals. Evangeline talked about wanting to learn piano, her small hands demonstrating finger positions she'd seen on television. "And then," Serafina said around a bite of pizza, "when our hearts are all fixed, we can run really fast and never get tired." "That's right," Adam agreed solemnly. "Your hearts will be strong enough for anything you want to do." "Anything?" Evangeline asked. "Anything at all?" As the evening progressed, Janiyah found herself studying Adam's face, noting the way he hung on every word their daughters spoke, as if trying to memorize years of conversations he'd missed in the space of a single evening. There was a quality to his attention that went beyond mere interest. It was the desperate focus of someone trying to catch up on 7 years of fatherhood in one night. After dinner, they moved to the living area where the girls spread out their coloring books and homework on the coffee table. Adam settled on the floor beside them, helping Serafina with a math worksheet, while Evangeline worked on a drawing of the duck family they'd visited that afternoon. "Daddy," Serafina said, looking up from her multiplication problems, "Mama has pictures of when we were babies. Do you want to see them?" The question hit the room like a small bomb. Jania felt her breath catch, suddenly aware that she'd never considered whether Adam would want to see documentation of the years he'd missed, whether it would be comfort or torture. Adam glanced at Jania uncertainly. "If your mama doesn't mind." "I don't mind," Jania said softly. "Sarah, my phone is in my purse, but be very careful with it." Serafina retrieved the phone with the reverent care of someone handling a sacred object, then settled between Adam and Evangeline as they scrolled through years of photos. Jania watched from the couch as Adam saw his daughter's entire childhoods unfold in digital memories. First baths, first birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, lost teeth, and countless ordinary moments that made up the texture of their lives. "This is us at the zoo," Evangeline explained, pointing to a photo of both girls grinning beside the elephant enclosure. "I was scared of the big animals, but Sarah held my hand. And this is when I lost my first tooth," Serafina added, swiping to a gap-toothed grin. "The tooth fairy brought me a whole $1." Adam's hands were gentle as he held the phone, his green eyes soft with what might have been grief or gratitude or some combination of both. "You were beautiful babies," he said quietly. "You're beautiful now." "Mama says we look like you," Evangeline observed. "We have your eyes." "You do, but you have your mama's smile and her kind heart." "Tell us about when we were little babies," Serafina demanded, "before you went away. Do you remember anything?" The request hung in the air like a challenge. Adam was quiet for so long that Jania wondered if he would answer at all. Finally, he set the phone carefully on the coffee table and pulled both girls closer. "I remember everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I remember the day you were born, Serafina first, then Evangeline 23 minutes later. Sarah, you came out screaming and immediately grabbed the doctor's finger like you were announcing your arrival to the world. Evie, you were quieter, but you looked around at everything with these wide, serious eyes, like you were taking inventory." Both girls giggled at this description, settling more comfortably against their father's sides. "I remember that Evangeline loved to be sung to sleep, and Serafina preferred being rocked. I remember bath time, when you both fit in the kitchen sink and splashed water everywhere, and I remember reading to you the same 3 books over and over because those were your favorites." "What books?" Evangeline asked sleepily. "Good Night Moon, Pat the Bunny, and The Runaway Bunny. You made me read The Runaway Bunny so many times I had it memorized." "That's still my favorite," Evangeline whispered. "Mama reads it to me when I have bad dreams." Adam's arms tightened around both girls. "I thought about you every single day I was gone," he said quietly. "I wondered what you were learning, what you were interested in, whether you were happy. I missed you so much it felt like part of my heart was missing." "But you're here now," Serafina said pragmatically, "and tomorrow you're going to fix our hearts so they work better." "That's right. And then I'm never going away again." The promise hung in the air, heavy with 7 years of absence and the weight of an uncertain future. Jania felt tears prick her eyes as she watched Adam hold their daughters, his face fierce with protective love. As the evening wound down, they moved through the familiar ritual of bedtime preparation, teeth brushing, pajama selection, the careful arrangement of stuffed animals for optimal comfort. Both girls seemed more tired than usual, the emotional weight of tomorrow's surgery taking its toll despite their brave faces. "Mama," Evangeline said, as Jania tucked her into the suite's smaller bedroom. "Are you scared about tomorrow?" The question was asked with the devastating directness that children possessed, cutting straight to the heart of what adults spent so much energy trying to hide. "A little bit," Jania admitted, "but I'm not scared of Daddy. He's very good at fixing hearts, and he loves you very much." "I know. I can tell because he looks at us the same way you do." "How do I look at you?" "Like we're the most important thing in the whole world." The simple observation broke something open in Jania's chest. "You are the most important thing in the whole world. To Daddy too. To Daddy too." After both girls were settled, Jania joined Adam in the living area. He was standing at the window, his hands braced against the glass, looking out at the city lights. The surgical scrubs he'd wear tomorrow were laid out carefully on the chair beside him, a tangible reminder of what morning would bring. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. "Technically, yes. The surgical plan is solid, the team is excellent, all the contingencies are mapped out." He turned from the window to face her. "Emotionally, I don't think I'll ever be ready to cut into my daughter's hearts." "But you will." "I have to. They trust me to save them, and I won't let them down again." The weight of his responsibility was visible in every line of his body, the crushing pressure of knowing that tomorrow would either reunite their family permanently or destroy it forever. Jania moved closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "Adam," she said quietly, "whatever happens tomorrow, you need to know that you're not the same man who left 7 years ago. These past 2 weeks, watching you with them, you're exactly the father they need." He turned to face her fully, and suddenly they were standing closer than they'd been since the day he'd walked back into their lives. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "I love them so much," he whispered, "more than I knew was possible. The thought of losing them now." "You won't lose them. You don't know that. I know you. I know what you're capable of when you're fighting for someone you love." The words hung between them, loaded with 7 years of separation and the slow, careful rebuilding of trust. Adam reached up slowly, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek with the same gentle reverence he'd shown their daughters. "Jania," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. For a moment, the space between them seemed to dissolve. She could feel the warmth of his body, smell the familiar scent of his skin, see the way his eyes had gone dark with something that looked like longing. They leaned toward each other as if drawn by gravity, 7 years of distance collapsing into inches, then millimeters. A soft sound from the girl's bedroom broke the spell. Evangeline calling for water, or maybe just talking in her sleep. They stepped apart instantly, the moment shattered by the reminder of what was really important. "I should check on them," Jania said, her voice unsteady. "Yes, and I should get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early." At the door, Adam paused. "Jania? Whatever happened between us, whatever mistakes I made, I need you to know that tomorrow isn't about us, it's about them. I won't let anything, not my feelings, not my regrets, not my hopes for our future, interfere with giving them the best possible outcome." "I know," she said simply. "Save them first. Everything else can wait." He nodded and left, and Jania stood alone in the suite's living room, touching her cheek where his fingers had been. Outside the window, Seattle sparkled in the darkness, beautiful and distant. In a few hours, the sun would rise on the most important day of their lives. But for now, in this suspended moment before the storm, there was only the quiet sound of their daughters breathing peacefully in the next room, and the echo of a promise that had finally, after 7 years, felt real. Never going away again. Chapter 8. The longest day. Dawn arrived like a whispered promise through the surgical suite windows, painting the Seattle skyline in shades of rose and gold that should have been beautiful but felt ominous instead. At 5:47 a.m., the corridors of Mercy General hummed with controlled urgency. Nurses checking equipment, anesthesiologists reviewing charts, and in the center of it all, two small girls who would either emerge with hearts strong enough to last a lifetime or not emerge at all. Janaya had been awake since 4, watching her daughters sleep while trying to memorize their peaceful faces. Serafina lay sprawled across her bed with characteristic abandon, one arm flung over her stuffed elephant. Evangeline slept curled on her side, her breathing soft and even, her hand tucked beneath her cheek. They looked so small, so impossibly fragile to be facing what lay ahead. "Time to wake up, babies," Janaya said softly, sitting on the edge of Serafina's bed. "Today's the big day." Serafina's eyes opened immediately, alert and focused. "Is it time for Daddy to fix our hearts?" "It's time," Janaya confirmed. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," Serafina announced with fierce determination. "I want to be able to run really fast." Evangeline stirred more slowly, her eyes opening to study her mother's face with serious intensity. "Mama, are you scared?" "A little bit," Janaya admitted. "But I'm not scared of Daddy. He's the very best heart doctor in the whole world." The pre-surgical routine unfolded with careful precision. Special soap for washing, hospital gowns that needed creative folding, identification bracelets that seemed absurdly official for such small wrists. Through it all, both girls maintained their composure with bravery that made Janaya's chest tight with pride and terror. Adam appeared at 7 exactly, wearing surgical scrubs and carrying 2 small stuffed animals, a lion for Serafina and a butterfly for Evangeline. "These are surgical assistants," he explained seriously. "They'll stay with you during the whole operation and make sure you feel safe." "Will they help you fix our hearts?" Serafina asked, clutching the lion. "Absolutely. Lions are very brave, and butterflies are excellent at helping things transform into something beautiful." Dr. Florian, the anesthesiologist, arrived with the surgical transport team, gentle faces and reassuring voices that had perfected the art of making terrifying situations feel manageable. The plan was precise. Serafina, first at 7 a.m., with Adam leading a team of 6 specialists. Evangeline would follow the next day, as Adam refused to operate on both daughters when exhausted. Their lives were too precious to risk with anything less than his complete focus. "I want to go first," Serafina announced. "Evie doesn't like medical stuff as much as I do." "That's very brave of you," Adam said, crouching to her level. "I'm going to take very good care of your heart, okay?" At the surgical wing doors, families typically said their goodbyes, but nothing about their situation was typical. "I love you, baby girl," Janaya whispered, leaning down to kiss Serafina's forehead. "Be brave, and I'll see you when you wake up." "I love you too, Mama. Don't worry, Daddy's going to make everything perfect." The surgical doors closed behind them with a soft whoosh, leaving Janaya and Evangeline alone in the corridor. Their world had narrowed to the space between heartbeats, the measured time of waiting and hoping. "Mama," Evangeline said quietly, "can we go to the chapel? I want to say a prayer for Sarah." The chapel was peaceful in the morning light, empty except for a few early visitors seeking comfort. They settled into a pew near the back, Evangeline's small hand warm in Janaya's. "God," Evangeline whispered, "please help Daddy fix Sarah's heart really good and help Mama not be so scared. Amen." The hours passed with the peculiar distortion of extreme stress, minutes that felt like hours, then sudden rushes where whole periods seemed to disappear. Other families came and went, each dealing with their own medical crises. The waiting room was a democracy of worry, where expensive clothes meant nothing in the face of human vulnerability. At 11:30, Adam's surgical coordinator, Patricia, appeared in the waiting room doorway. "Mrs. Williams, Dr. Voges asked me to update you. Serafina's surgery is progressing well, but it's taking longer than anticipated. He's encountered additional structural damage requiring extra repair work." The words hit Janaya like ice water. Complications. More complex anatomy than imaging showed. Dr. Voges is taking extra time to ensure the most thorough repair possible. He estimates another 3 to 4 hours. What does this mean for Evangeline's surgery? It will be postponed until tomorrow. Dr. Voges won't operate when he's already been in surgery for 8 hours. At 2:15 p.m., when Evangeline should have been in surgery herself, Adam appeared in the waiting room doorway. He looked exhausted, his scrubs wrinkled and his hair disheveled, but his face carried the cautious relief of someone who'd just performed a miracle. "She's okay," he said without preamble, and Janaya felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. Serafina's surgery was successful, more complex than we anticipated, but her heart is functioning beautifully. "But I need to rest before Evangeline's procedure. I won't operate on our daughter unless I'm at my absolute best. Her surgery will be tomorrow morning." They followed Adam through corridors to the PICU. Serafina lay in a bed that seemed too large for her small body, surrounded by monitors and IV lines, but breathing steadily on her own. Her face was pale but peaceful, and as they watched, her fingers moved slightly around the stuffed lion. "She looks so little," Evangeline whispered. "She's going to be fine," Adam said softly. "Her heart is working perfectly now, better than it ever has." They spent the afternoon in vigil beside Serafina's bed, taking turns holding her hand and whispering encouragement. As evening approached, Serafina's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was unfocused at first, until it found Janaya's face. "Mama?" Her voice was scratchy, but unmistakably her own. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Did Daddy fix my heart?" "He fixed it perfectly. You're going to be able to run as fast as you want." Serafina's eyes found Adam. "Thank you, Daddy. It doesn't hurt anymore." "You're very welcome, sweetheart. Rest now. Your heart needs time to get used to working so well." As Serafina drifted back to sleep, Adam pulled Janaya aside. For the first time since morning, they were alone together, and the weight of the day's emotions hung between them. "One down," he said quietly. "One to go." "Janaya, what happened today? The complications, they won't happen with Evangeline. Her anatomy is different, cleaner. I expect her surgery to be much more straightforward." "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be in medicine. But more than that, I won't let anything happen to either of them. They're everything." Standing in the soft light of the PQ, surrounded by the quiet sounds of healing and hope, Janaya felt something fundamental shift in her chest. The man beside her wasn't the one who'd left 7 years ago. This was someone who'd been forged by loss and regret into something stronger, someone worthy of the trust their daughters had placed in him. "I know," she said simply. "I can see it in everything you do." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in months, her heart beating strong and sure in her chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had this. One miracle completed, and the promise of another to come. Chapter 9. Critical Hours. At 3:17 a.m. on the second night after Serafina's surgery, the monitors began screaming. Janaya jerked awake in the chair beside Serafina's bed, her heart hammering as she watched her daughter's small body convulse against the restraints. The peaceful recovery they'd hoped for had deteriorated into a nightmare of complications. Fluid around the heart, erratic rhythms, a body rejecting the repair that should have saved her life. "Call Dr. Voges," Nurse Aurelia said tersely. "Now." Within minutes, Adam appeared wearing the same clothes he'd had on for 3 days. He hadn't left the hospital since Serafina's surgery, catching fragments of sleep in on-call rooms when crisis allowed. Pericardial effusion, Adam said grimly, moving to Serafina's bedside. Fluid is building up around her heart. We need to drain it immediately. The next hour passed in urgent medical procedures. Adam worked with focused intensity, his hands steady despite operating on his own daughter. Jania watched from the corner, hands pressed against her mouth. There, Adam said finally, straightening as monitors showed stable rhythms. That should help, but we need to watch her carefully. Is she going to be okay? Evangeline appeared in the doorway wearing pajamas and clutching her butterfly. She'd been sleeping in the family lounge, trying to stay close despite the medical intensity. "Come here, sweetheart," Jania said, opening her arms. Evangeline climbed into her lap, both watching Serafina's pale face for improvement. "She looks really sick," Evangeline observed honestly. "She is sick," Adam said gently. "Her body is having trouble adjusting to her new heart, but she's strong, and we're doing everything to help her." "When is my surgery?" "Tomorrow morning if Serafina stays stable." The hours that followed were a careful dance between hope and fear. Serafina's condition improved slowly, vital signs gradually stabilizing as medications began working. By noon, she was awake for brief periods, asking for water and managing weak smiles. "Evie," she whispered during one lucid moment, "are you scared about your surgery?" "A little bit," Evangeline admitted. "But Daddy fixed your heart, so I know he can fix mine too." "It doesn't hurt as much as I thought," Serafina said, voice growing stronger. "And Daddy says when we're better, we can do anything we want." Listening to their daughters plan futures, Jania felt crushing weight in her chest begin to ease. They were going to be okay. Both would have the lives they'd dreamed of. At 7 a.m. the following morning, exactly 24 hours after Serafina's surgery began, Evangeline was wheeled into surgery. This goodbye was different, hopeful rather than desperate, informed by knowledge that Adam could work miracles when lives of those he loved hung in balance. "See you soon, baby girl," Jania whispered, kissing Evangeline's forehead. "Take care of Sarah while I'm sleeping." Unlike Serafina's complicated surgery, Evangeline's procedure unfolded exactly as planned. 4 hours later, Adam emerged with the exhausted but triumphant expression of someone who just performed his second miracle in 2 days. "Perfect," he told Jania simply. "Absolutely perfect. Her anatomy was exactly what we expected, and the repair went flawlessly." They moved Evangeline into the PICU bed next to her sisters, creating a small island of family in the medical intensity. Both girls were unconscious but stable, hearts beating with strong, steady rhythms absent for so long. By evening, both girls were awake and alert, comparing surgical experiences with matter-of-fact competitiveness that had marked their relationship since birth. "I feel weird," Serafina admitted as sun set outside PICU windows. "Like my heart is too big for my chest." "That's normal," Adam assured her. "Your heart has been working so hard that now it doesn't know what to do with itself. It'll figure out the new normal in a few days." As night fell, the PICU settled into quieter rhythms. Both girls were stable enough that constant monitoring could be reduced, allowing something approaching normal family time. "You should get some real sleep," Jania told Adam as he settled between the girls' beds. "In an actual bed. I'm not leaving them. Not until I'm sure they're both completely stable." The fierce protectiveness in his voice was absolute. She recognized the expression, the same determination that had carried him through becoming one of the most skilled cardiac surgeons in the country. "Then at least try to get comfortable," she said, gesturing toward the family lounge. "There's a couch that reclines." They moved to the family lounge reluctantly, like parents afraid to let children out of sight. Adam sank onto the larger couch with exhaustion. "Come here," he said softly, opening his arms. Jania hesitated only a moment before settling beside him, her head finding the familiar hollow of his shoulder as if 7 years hadn't passed. His arms came around her immediately, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt truly safe. "We did it," Adam murmured against her hair. "They're going to be okay." "You did it," she corrected. "I just held them together until you could save them." "No," he said firmly. "You did the hard part. 7 years of raising them, keeping them healthy, bringing them to me when they needed saving." They drifted off together on the uncomfortable hospital couch, exhausted by emotion and sustained by hope. Around them, the hospital continued its rhythm of healing, but for this moment they were insulated by quiet knowledge that their daughters were sleeping peacefully, hearts beating strong and sure. When nurses found them the next morning, they looked like any couple who'd been through medical crisis together, rumpled, exhausted, but fundamentally unbroken. "Jania," Adam whispered as consciousness returned with dawn light. When this is all over, when they're home and healthy, I want to talk about us, about whether we can find our way back to each other." She was quiet for so long he wondered if she'd fallen back asleep. Finally, her voice came soft against his chest. "I'd like that too." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't rejection either. It was the beginning of possibility, fragile and new, built on the foundation of 2 daughters whose hearts now beat with the rhythm of hope itself. Chapter 10. Hearts Made Whole. 3 months later, morning sunlight through the windows of their new house painted everything in shades of gold and possibility. Jania stood at the kitchen sink, watching Serafina and Evangeline race across their backyard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze like music she'd thought she might never hear again. They were running, actually running, without breathlessness or blue lips or careful pacing that had marked their lives before surgery. Serafina had joined the soccer team as promised, her rebuilt heart pumping strong as she practiced drills with characteristic determination. Evangeline had started piano lessons and discovered an intuitive gift for melody. "They look happy," Adam said softly, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. His hair was still mussed from sleep, and he wore the faded medical school t-shirt that had survived 15 years. "They look normal," Jania replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'd forgotten what normal looked like. Normal was bedtime stories without oxygen monitors. Normal was soccer practice and piano recitals. Normal was the luxury of worrying about ordinary things like math grades instead of cardiac failure." The path to this kitchen hadn't been simple. After the girls' successful surgeries, practical questions demanded answers. Where would they live? How would they co-parent? What did forgiveness look like when translated into daily life? And underlying everything, how did a billionaire CEO and a nurse rebuild trust across 7 years of hurt? The conversation that changed everything had taken place 2 months after surgery, in the hospital garden where Adam had first begun hoping they might find their way back. The girls had been home for 6 weeks, recovering beautifully, but requiring frequent cardiology follow-ups. "Jania," Adam had said, settling beside her on the bench where they'd shared so many complicated conversations. "I have something for you." He'd pulled an envelope from his jacket, not crisp hospital stationery, but something older, worn. The paper was yellowed at the edges, and her name was written across the front in Adam's careful handwriting. "The letter I wrote you 7 years ago. The one my mother took." Jania had stared at the envelope as if it contained explosives. "Where did you get it?" "I asked her for it last week when I told her about the girl's surgery. She'd kept it all these years, in her jewelry box like some trophy." His voice carried weight of old anger, carefully controlled. "She gave it to me after I made clear she could either be part of our lives going forward or keep her secrets, but not both." The letter was everything he'd said, an explanation of the lawsuit, the harassment, the impossible choice between her safety and his presence. But more than that, It was a love letter, written by a young man who believed he was losing everything. By the time she'd finished reading, both were crying. 7 years of misunderstanding finally given voice. "I was so angry," Janaya had whispered. "So angry that you'd left us to deal with everything alone." "I should have trusted you to make the choice yourself," Adam replied. "I should have had faith that we were strong enough to weather it together." That conversation led to others, careful explorations of who they'd become and whether those people could build something together. They'd started slowly, shared dinners during the girls' recovery, family outings disguised as medical follow-ups, gradual reconstruction of intimacy shattered by pride and fear. The girls had been the catalyst. They'd adapted to having their father with remarkable resilience, but they'd also made clear they wanted more than weekend visits. "Why can't Daddy live with us?" Serafina had asked with characteristic directness. "He's here every day anyway." "Families live together," Evangeline had added. "That's how families work." The house they'd chosen was everything their old apartment hadn't been, a sprawling estate in Seattle's most exclusive neighborhood, with spacious rooms for 2 active children, a yard large enough for soccer practice, a music room for piano, and a home office where Adam could manage Voge's medical corporation without compromising family time. "Mama, Daddy, come see!" Evangeline's voice called from the backyard. "I can do a cartwheel!" They moved to the back door together, coffee cups in hand, to watch their daughter's athletic achievement. Evangeline's cartwheel was more enthusiasm than technique, but her grin of accomplishment was radiant. "That was excellent," Adam called out, his voice carrying parental pride that had nothing to do with surgical precision and everything to do with unconditional love. They spent the morning in the backyard, teaching cartwheels and practicing soccer moves, and simply reveling in ordinary family chaos that medical crises made precious. By noon, both girls were grass-stained and exhausted. "Can we have a family movie night tonight?" Evangeline asked as they cleaned up from lunch. "That sounds perfect," Janaya agreed. "What movie should we watch?" "Something with a happy ending," Serafina declared. "I like happy endings." After the girls settled for quiet time, Adam and Janaya found themselves alone in the kitchen they were still learning to share. "I have something to ask you," Adam said, his voice carrying nervous quality that made Janaya look up from the dishes she'd been washing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that made her heart stop completely. "I know we're doing everything backwards, but I want to do this properly." "Adam." "Let me finish," he said gently, dropping to one knee beside the kitchen island. 7 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life when I walked away. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just afraid that loving you meant I could lose you." Jania's hands were shaking as she turned to face him fully. "But these past few months have taught me something important," Adam continued. "Love isn't about protecting someone from life's difficulties. It's about facing them together. It's about trusting that what we have is strong enough to survive whatever comes next." He opened the box to reveal a simple solitaire diamond, elegant and timeless. "This isn't the same ring I gave you before. That ring was chosen by a young man who thought love was about grand gestures. This ring was chosen by someone who knows that love is about showing up every day, even when it's hard. Jania Williams, will you marry me? Not because our children need a father, not because it's practical, but because I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the love you've given me." The proposal hung in the air between them, weighted with 7 years of separation and 3 months of careful rebuilding. Outside, she could hear the girls playing, their voices bright with joy that came from hearts that worked properly. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, absolutely, yes." The ring slipped onto her finger like it had been waiting 7 years to find its home. Adam stood and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since he'd walked back into their lives, Jania felt completely whole. 4 months later, They married in the same hospital chapel where they'd prayed for their daughters' lives, surrounded by medical staff who'd become family and friends who'd supported them through the darkest period. Serafina and Evangeline served as joint maids of honor, wearing matching lavender dresses that cost more than Jania's old monthly salary. Father Caspian performed the ceremony, his words simple and profound. Marriage is not just about love in easy moments. It's about choosing each other again and again, especially when life tests your commitment. You've already proven your love can survive separation, fear, and the ultimate test of your children's lives hanging in balance. As the sun set over Seattle, they danced to the same song that had played at their first wedding, older now, marked by experience and loss and hard-won wisdom that came from nearly losing everything. "No regrets?" Adam asked as they swayed together in fading light. "Only one," Jania replied. "I regret that it took a medical crisis to bring us back together." "We didn't lose that time," Adam said firmly. "We needed those 7 years to become the people who could build this, the people who could choose love even when it's complicated." 1 year later, they stood in the same backyard where they'd watched their daughters run for the first time after surgery, this time watching Serafina score the winning goal while Evangeline played a Chopin piece she'd learned by heart. Jania's pregnancy was just beginning to show, a gentle curve promising another miracle. "Happy?" Adam asked, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Completely," she replied, and meant it. They'd learned that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. Love was about choosing each other daily, about facing fears together, about building something strong enough to survive whatever tests life might bring. Their hearts, all of them, had been broken and repaired and made stronger than before. As the sun set on another ordinary, miraculous day, Jania leaned into Adam's embrace and listened to the sound of their daughter's laughter, their new baby's heartbeat, and the quiet promise of forever that hummed in the space between one breath and the next. Some hearts, she'd learned, were worth waiting for, some love was worth fighting for, and some families, once lost, could be found again, not the same as before, but better, stronger, whole. The end activities that would carry them through the afternoon. "Can we have a family movie night tonight?" Evangeline asked as they cleaned up from lunch. "With popcorn and everything?" "That sounds perfect," Jania agreed. "What movie should we watch?" "Something with a happy ending," Serafina declared. "I like happy endings." After the girls settled down for quiet time, Evangeline with her piano practice, Serafina with a book about soccer strategy, Adam and Jania found themselves alone in the kitchen they were still learning to share. "I have something to ask you," Adam said, his voice carrying a nervous quality that made Jania look up from the dishes she'd been washing. "Okay." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that made her heart stop completely. "I know we're doing everything backwards. I know we're already living together and raising children and building a life. But I want to do this properly." "Adam, let me finish," he said gently, dropping to one knee beside the kitchen island. 7 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life when I walked away from you. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just afraid. Afraid that loving you meant I could lose you. Afraid that my problems would become your problems. Afraid that I wasn't strong enough to be the man you deserved. Jania's hands were shaking as she turned to face him fully. "But these past few months have taught me something important," Adam continued. "Love isn't about protecting someone from life's difficulties. It's about facing them together. It's about trusting that what we have is strong enough to survive whatever comes next." He opened the box to reveal a simple, solitaire diamond, elegant and timeless. "This isn't the same ring I gave you before. That ring was chosen by a young man who thought love was about grand gestures and perfect moments. This ring was chosen by someone who knows that love is about showing up every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Adam, she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Janiah Williams, will you marry me? Not because our children need a father, not because it's the practical thing to do, but because I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the love you've given me. The proposal hung in the air between them, weighted with 7 years of separation and 3 months of careful rebuilding. Outside, she could hear the girls playing in their yard, their voices bright with the kind of joy that came from hearts that worked the way they were supposed to. Yes, she said simply. Yes, absolutely yes. The ring slipped onto her finger, like it had been waiting 7 years to find its home. Adam stood and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since he'd walked back into their lives, Janiah felt completely, utterly whole. When? She asked against his lips. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'm not going anywhere ever again. What about the girls? Shouldn't we ask them? I already did, Adam admitted, grinning. Last week when you were at work. Serafina said it was about time, and Evangeline asked if she could wear a fancy dress. You asked our 8-year-olds for permission to propose to me. They're the most important people in your life. If they'd said no, I would have waited until they were ready. And if they'd said no forever, then I would have loved you from whatever distance you'd allow, for however long you'd let me. 4 months later, they married in the same hospital chapel where they'd prayed for their daughters' lives, surrounded by the medical staff who'd become family and the friends who'd supported them through the darkest period of their lives. Serafina and Evangeline served as joint maids of honor, wearing matching lavender dresses that cost more than Janiah's old monthly salary, a reminder of how dramatically their circumstances had changed. Father Caspian performed the ceremony, his words simple and profound. Marriage is not just about love in the easy moments, it's about choosing each other again and again, especially when life tests your commitment. Adam and Janiah, you've already proven that your love can survive separation, fear, and the ultimate test of your children's lives hanging in the balance. Whatever comes next, you're ready for it. The reception was held in the hospital's garden, where they'd had so many of the conversations that led them back to each other. As the sun set over Seattle, they danced to the same song that had played at their first wedding, older now, marked by experience and loss, and the hard-won wisdom that came from nearly losing everything. No regrets? Adam asked, as they swayed together in the fading light. Only one, Janiah replied. I regret that it took a medical crisis to bring us back together. I regret all the time we lost. We didn't lose it, Adam said firmly. We needed those 7 years to become the people who could build this. The people who could choose love even when it's complicated, even when it's scary, even when we're not sure we deserve it. And now? Now we get to spend the rest of our lives making up for lost time. 1 year later, they stood in the same backyard where they'd watched their daughters run for the first time after surgery. This time, watching Serafina scored the winning goal in her soccer tournament, while Evangeline played a Chopin piece she'd learned by heart. Janiah's pregnancy was just beginning to show, a gentle curve that promised another miracle in their carefully rebuilt life. Happy? Adam asked, his hand resting on her growing belly. Completely, she replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They'd learned that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. Love was about choosing each other daily, about facing fears together, about building something strong enough to survive whatever tests life might bring. Their hearts, all of them, the ones that beat in their chests and the ones that ran around their backyard, had been broken and repaired and made stronger than they'd ever been before. As the sun set on another ordinary, miraculous day, Janiyah leaned into Adam's embrace and listened to the sound of their daughter's laughter, their new baby's heartbeat, and the quiet promise of forever that hummed in the space between one breath and the next. Some hearts, she'd learned, were worth waiting for. Some love was worth fighting for. And some families, once lost, could be found again, not the same as they were before, but better, stronger, whole. The end.